Continue to commemorate Women's Day, there are huge questions to ask about the role of men. It's men who violently attack women. It's men who are responsible for patriarchy, both the patriarchy of the past and the patriarchy we see now. Mara Glennie is the founder of the Tears Foundation, which helps women who've been abused. Mara, good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here on Women's Day.
What role should men be playing in improving the lives of women? And in some ways, I think it's just about men stopping some of their behaviors.
Yes, interactive bystanders are absolutely vital, and not talking away an abuse when it's happened. Often they say, well, you know how she was. One can't quite blame him for doing that. In fact, we should always believe a survivor, and we should see how we could help them.
So men need to be more involved. When someone comes to them and says, this happened, or says, this happened to my sister, they actually need to play a role.
Absolutely. When I started Tears, I would tell people that I was a survivor in the hope that they would help me on my journey. And they would often be embarrassed, call someone else in to take the discussion, or ignore it completely. In fact, as a survivor, and with the many thousands of survivors that we deal with, you need active participation. It can simply be, I'm glad to see you doing well now. Is there anything I can help you with? We don't need sympathy. We need proactive assistance.
There's this sense, I think, I don't think it's just men, but I think it's often men, of they don't know what to do. They almost don't know the vocabulary. They sort of run away from it, which, of course, leaves the survivor in an incredibly difficult position.
Yes, it's often very, very awkward. So one of the talks I do give is what to say to a person when she discloses. So if it's an intimate situation, you can be more personal. If it's in an office situation, it's just say, I'm sorry, how can I help you? Because they really don't need you to put their arms around them or offer sympathy, because it's tough out there to be a survivor. It's tough to speak out. So they need strong people standing with them.
I think some men might be tempted to go and, if they believe that, if they're told that a man has hurt a woman that they know, to go and hurt the man. How do you avoid that?
Well, it's absolutely no help whatsoever. The deed has already been done. So I think that leads us to the thing that we need to be educating the younger generation. I'm very proud to tell you today that on Youth Day, we launched a new service to educate the youth. So on their mobile phone for free, anywhere in South Africa, they can ask questions, because we do not teach our youth about sexual matters.
Have attitudes changed at all? Sometimes I get the sense that it's as bad as it's ever been. And yet, if you look at the law, if you look at the conversations that we have in public, which I'm old enough to know we didn't have 10, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, this kind of thing was hardly ever discussed. Something has shifted in our society. Obviously, it hasn't shifted nearly enough.
Well, I do think that we have the best law, amongst the best laws in the world. But we have amongst the most poorly affected laws in the world. So we can have on legislation that A, B, and C should be done at a police station, but sadly, that fails to be done. That's why organizations like Tears have a meaningful role to play, because we believe people and we try to help them. The service that we offer could vary from helping them get a protection order, helping them find a safe house, and in many cases sending an Uber to take them to the safe house.
So often in these conversations, the role of the police comes up, and the way that when a survivor goes to say to a police officer, a female police officer or a male police officer, this happened to me. They sometimes aren't able to tell their story, they're sometimes not believed, they're sometimes told to go home and sort it out. How big is that? How big of a problem is that?
There's a very big problem with the police, especially at the front desk. I must say, though, that the sexual division is extremely good, because all the police that are working in that division are volunteers. The difficulty mostly comes from untrained police at the front desk.
So once you get past the front desk, is there actually an investigation of this kind of crime, or is it just sort of put on the back burner somehow by an investigating officer who already has 100 other cases?
That is the biggest difficulty. There are too few people and too many cases, which means they are not always properly investigated.
We've seen NGOs, I think like yours, that receive funding from the Gauteng provincial government, being told by the Gauteng provincial government in April this year that they would no longer receive that money. It comes from the Department of Social Development in Gauteng. If I recall correctly, the Premier, Panyaza Lesufi, eventually intervened because there was such a public outcry. What would happen to your NGOs and the services you provide? What would happen to the people you provide those services to if you didn't get this money?
First of all, I must say it's an absolute disgrace. I do think that the people that did the budget cuts have not been on the ground. They don't know what it's like out there. And then on the second point, I didn't qualify for any of the applications I made to government. So for me, it will be business as usual.
The idea is that government, the provincial government, says it would be able to take over the services provided by NGOs in this sector. Do you believe it would really be able to do that, or would we find that victims of sexual violence are suddenly basically just left in the street, I suppose?
I think they've been let down, and I don't think the government can handle it. I am an award winner of one of the presidents of the Gauteng's awards. However, I've also had the privilege of training their call centre and a lot of the NGOs, so I know they can't do it.
You've been doing this now for 10 years, Mara, and you started very small beginnings. Do you believe that our society has changed fundamentally on this issue? Let me put the question another way. Have men changed at all?
So the answer is that the outlooks have changed in some ways, but the reality on the ground is it's just another talk shop. So I'm hoping that men will change, because there's such a lot of great, good men out there. It's for them to lead the pack.
Mara Glennie, thank you, founder of the Tears Foundation. Really appreciate you coming in on Women's Day here on Newsfeed.